I'm Dr. Hackie Reitman. Welcome to another episode of Exploring Different Brains. And today we have returning to us my friend from up Canada way, the ADHD man, the man who named his company Don't Diss My Ability, Sean Smith. Sean, welcome back.
Thanks, Hackie. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you introduce yourself properly to the audience? With me, I'm just seeing an old friend who's been a champion of ADHD. We have a good time all the time. And, you're you're a football player. You got diagnosed in adulthood. And I remember how tough you had it in your youth. But why don't you introduce yourself properly?
Sure. I'm Sean Smith. I'm the founder of Don't Diss My Ability. I'm a counselor and psychotherapist by trade. I'm also a consultant and a guest lecturer. But what I do isn't nearly as exciting as how I got there, I like to say. I was diagnosed with ADHD and attentive type at the age of 30. Prior to my diagnosis, it took me 4 years to finish 3 years of high school, 32 attempts to earn 18 credits required to graduate, including failing grade 10 math 4 times. I got snuck into college to play football. I started playing football my first year of grade 12. By my second year, I was an all-star. Got recruiting packages from every major Canadian university with a football team. Huge high and then a huge low because I didn't have the grades to attend any of these schools, but a college snuck me in, prep school, brought my grades up enough to attend university. Managed to graduate undiagnosed with a 2.3 GPA. And then fast forward to being 30, having a ton of life experience in between and being prescribed Ritalin, which basically took my thought process from dial-up to high speed. The pieces of the puzzle that were my life that never seemed to fit all of a sudden came together with relative ease. And I realized that I wasn't dumb. I was actually quite smart. I went back to upgrade as a mature student, taking 5 courses, new GPA of 3.7. And then in 2010, I got into a Master's of Education in Counseling Psychology program on academic probation and graduated a year later at the top of my class. So a very unique lens through which to help people.
And what I love the best about the story is then you became a self-advocate. You used all of your skill sets to help others. Tell us about your company.
Sure. So my company was created kind of out of a necessity. I was about to get laid off from a disability-related nonprofit I was working for, and I saw kind of a niche to help people with a hidden tax credit in Canada for people with disabilities. And so I kind of brokered a deal to do some consulting for them and help people access this hidden tax credit. In the States, you have IRS. In Canada, we have the CRA. And there are 2 things that are certain in this life, Hackie. I'm sure you're well aware that they are death and taxes. And so Canada Revenue kept changing the rules of the game and making it harder and harder for people to access this, which meant for me, I only charged a fee if I was able to help the person get a return. So as it turned out, I ended up volunteering more of my time than actually earning money. So I had to pivot and switch gears and haphazardly fell into counseling and psychotherapy, which, I mean, it was my education, a lot of my experience. But someone took a chance on me and hired me as a counselor for a community they were working in where they were looking for someone new to provide services for parents of kids with ADHD and individuals with ADHD. And just within, a couple of sessions kind of hit my groove. And I knew that this was going to be what I was going to be doing. A big part of what I was going to be doing for sure.
Something you and I have in common is that we're interested in tools that can help. Like when I wrote the Aspertools book about Asperger's and autism. Mm-hmm. Tell us some of the tools that you found helpful for ADHD.
Well, I'll start off by saying, Hackie, any tool is only as good as the person who uses it, right? So I think part of the challenge that a lot of us have is that we're looking for that holy grail, that one thing that's going to make everything better. And I just, to calm people's nerves, it's not out there, it doesn't exist yet. It really is about trying different things and sharing those amongst each other. But I'm an Apple person. I rely on Apple products to keep me organized. I've got my calendar, iCal, which is color coded for different types of work that I do, which also helps me with invoicing. So stuff that's in Don't Diss My Ability is in black. Stuff I do with the University of Connecticut is in Yukon Blue. Just setting it up that way. But that transfers into my personal life where the calendar, parts of the calendar are shared with my wife. So for personal, red is Sean, my wife is purple, anything family related is in green. And so whenever one of us puts something into the calendar, it automatically pops up so the other one sees it. So that is one of the biggest tools that I use, definitely, is iCal and color coding my calendars. Another that I started using probably about a year ago is the notes section in my iPhone as well, where I create a daily to-do list. And so there are some things that are on there that are really quite basic things. But, again, with the psychology of lists, if we only put the big things on there and we're not really able to chip away at them, then we kind of feel like we wasted our time and our day. So I have everything from brush my teeth, shower, get dressed, eat breakfast, take my enzymes, empty the dishwasher, refill the dishwasher, you name it. Because if I don't put that stuff on there, the day will get away from me and I'll forget. So again, just kind of bringing things back to basic to make a really simple to-do list for your daily tasks that you need to get done. And then you can kind of add on to that the other things that you might need to do that maybe are work related or a little bit heavier. Those are the two big things for me, definitely.
That's great. Tell us a bit about your role at UConn and with their Include program, which is excellent.
Yeah, I just got goosebumps, and I have to throw a shout out and a thank you to my friend, Dr. Jamie Barr, who, contacted me. We're old high school friends. We played hockey growing up. We went our separate ways. He became a doctor and got his PhD in engineering, and similar to you, found some of the stuff that I was posting on YouTube and Facebook, and he got in touch with me and said, "Sean, you're doing some really interesting stuff. I may have some folks who are interested in what you're doing." And so I'm a guest lecturer, and because of COVID, things were a little bit wonky this year, so I wasn't able to get down there in person. So we did two discussion series, a fall and a spring discussion series on neurodiversity with different topics. I also consult. So I'll look at some of the materials, some of the things that they're doing, provide some feedback. And I'm also on the advisory board, which is also very exciting because it really is innovative work. I mean, I don't know of any other type of program going on right now in any type of post-secondary institution where they're actively recruiting neurodiverse students for their classes, but also, allowing the students to come up, giving them the freedom to, pitch an idea to a prof that can show that they understand the content, but giving them creative access to show that in a way that, allows them to, not only follow their passion, but really put a piece of themselves into what they're doing. And I mean, you and I both know this is the way the world's going. So it's neat to be part of an innovative project that's kind of at the forefront of all this.
Well, that whole program is excellent, and thank you for introducing us to it as well. But it just goes along with the way your brain has become wired, that you're thinking in terms of solutions, you're thinking in terms of, yeah, everybody's got a different brain, so this is a tool you use. It doesn't mean, again, that you're dumb or you're stupid or anything. It means your brain works a little bit differently. I like the name of Temple Grandin's book, Different, Not Less, which is,
absolutely. I would say that I've even taken it a step further, Hacky, that like when I can identify what someone's gift is, then I will try to tap into my network to figure out who do I know that can really assess their competency level in this area. And it's been awesome. Like right now I'm brokering a book deal with a client, with a publishing company. I have another young man who, was out of high school for a couple of years. And I know I'm going to say this wrong, but taught himself how to use cybersecurity. He got back into high school and managed to graduate, got into college, but I had him meet with a friend of mine who has his PhD in computer science. And after an hour-long meeting, he said, by the time this kid's 20, he was 18 at the time, he said he'll be making $250K a year. And he wasn't, this is just being blunt and honest. Like this kid is beyond what he's going to learn in college. It's just phenomenal. So kind of taking low risk, high reward chances on people just to figure out, how far we can take things. It's pretty neat. I got another guy I'm working with, a young man in elementary school who has an interest in ventriloquism. And so I have him working with guy, Adam Seitz, who I'll introduce you to, another ADHDer who's been on the Chris Rock show, the Dave Chappelle show, Dora the Explorer, Go Diego Go. He's done all this voiceover work on all these different games and cartoons. And so I have them working together every other week. Nobody really asks a lot of these kids, what are you good at? What do you want to do? When we ask, typically it's, do you know what you want to do when you grow up? Well, Jesus, Hacky, I think we're still trying to figure it out. How do we expect these kids to know? Right? It's just, let's just try something. Let's see if it sticks, see if it doesn't. If it doesn't,
Well, it's
we'll
one
figure
of
something else out.
society's big problems that we don't expose the kids to different things. It's like one size fits all. And then now if you're lucky like I was, I knew when I was 12 years old, I was writing to the AMA from my parents' gas station that I wanted to be a doctor because we had a great doctor. But I was just lucky like that I had a calling, so to speak. What our interns here are 18-plus-year-old interns who are all neurodivergent in different ways. They get exposed to working behind the camera, in front of a camera, video editing, audio editing, writing articles. 3 of them are writing books about what they're self-advocating about. One's ADHD, one's OCD, one's tuberous sclerosis, and on the list goes on, because there are just never-ending variations. I'm on a bit of a campaign myself, Sean, to kind of move away from the trying to make everything a diagnosis with just going with traits like ADHD traits, OCD traits, autism traits, and matching up the tools to the individual traits where it's good. For instance, OCD should be obsessive compulsive difference, because on the one hand, at the one extreme, it's a disorder which is severely debilitating to some people. On the other hand, you and I know, and if just take, for example, any sport, no one's ever been a champion at anything without some OCD traits. You have to have them, you
Absolutely.
can't get away without them. And I'm finding ADHD, which I've not been officially diagnosed, but I'm finding more and more, and the more I learned and the way I see how I'm all over the map, that I certainly have ADHD traits for sure, and what do I do about them? Well, I learn from people like yourself, some of the tools to use and adapt them,
I think that's one of the biggest things is, is the adaptability that we have. And for people to know, when they are looking for that one system and it doesn't seem to work, like it's not necessarily for us to adopt something. I think one of the gifts that we have is that we can look at something and see why it doesn't work, but then also see what little tweaks we could make to make it work for us. And something else that I've kind of come up with recently that may also help you, Hacky. I've kind of figured out through my work that we kind of have 3 ages. We have our physical age, we have our emotional age, and we have our intellectual age. And so where we kind of miss the boat is that we talk to people at their physical age, which is just the age that they are, when really, I think the secret of my success in working with my clients is being able to connect with them at their emotional age and figuring out where they're at there. Because somebody may be physically 18, but emotionally they could be significantly younger or significantly older. And so, significantly younger, we might refer to them as somebody who might be a little more immature. For somebody who's significantly emotionally older, we would say they're an old soul, right? So kind of tapping into that area has really been helpful for me in working with my neurodivergent clients.
That's very, very insightful, very insightful. And I might mention to our audience what a great ally you've been for so many different organizations, for so many self-advocates, how you've helped us at Different Brains in many ways with the networking and your support. And I just want to thank you publicly for that. That's not taken for granted, and we really appreciate it.
Oh, I think that's part of, my ADHD is that when I see something or someone that I can connect together that is going to add value, I can't not do that. So it's just kind of an intrinsic thing that, when a little spark goes off, it's hard not to look and go that direction. So it also helps me. And I mean, I really I enjoy being a resourceful person and really getting to connect some interesting people together to see what they can create and come up with.
Now, would you like to, just for our audience, for those out there who may think they might have some ADHD and they're not sure about getting assessed, they might be any age, what's your advice to them?
Well, the first thing that I tell people when they disclose that they have ADHD or they think they have ADHD is welcome to the world of the uniquely gifted. This isn't what's wrong with you. This is what's right about you. And so when people are on the fence about getting assessed, I encourage a lot of people to get assessed. You're going to learn a lot about your thought process. You're going to learn a lot about your strengths and some challenges. But I find that the biggest barrier really is trying to get that actual assessment. I don't know what the process is like in the States, but in Canada, there's a few different ways to go about it. One is to meet with a psychiatrist, which is free through our public health system, although you're going to wait a while. You can hire a private psychologist, which will usually cost between $1,500 and $2,500. Which is again, is not cheap. So for people who are on social assistance, it makes it that much harder. One of the things that really burns me is that when I see kids with personalized learning plans and their coursework has been modified, but they don't have an assessment to back that up. That's one of the things that I find extremely discouraging and frustrating. But really, I think the hardest part is trying to get people access to the services that they need in order to get that diagnosis, so they can have that that bit of insight about whether or not they actually do have it. If they suspect, then I would say they likely do. But it's just I think for a lot of people it really is the aha moment that helps provide a little clarity and validates a lot of their feelings and thoughts that they've had.
Tell us from your point of view, something where our research pillar, which we've now started doing research here at Different Brains. I kind of stay out of their way. We have our director of research on a volunteer basis, who's wonderful, is Dr. Marsha Ratner of Boston University. I wanted to get your opinion because what they've chosen to do is the effect of the coronavirus times, the pandemic, on those with ADHD. And I wanted to get your experience and your take on that.
Well, it's been a challenge. I mean, it's been a challenge for everybody. I think one of the things that people have said around here is, we're waiting for the second wave of COVID-19 to come. My big thing is, I think we're still waiting for our mental health pandemic to come. I think we're still waiting for the first wave of that to come out. That hasn't happened. A lot of people have been really living and suffering in silence. For me personally, I had I'll call it a bit of a meltdown. My dog passed away. He was 13. It's just, there's just all this stuff happened around the same time. And I think there were a lot of us who really kind of suffered in silence and didn't really have a huge support network of people we could talk to. And I think with a lot of the political turmoil in the States and things that have happened, it's made it hard to communicate and find the right people to share with and feel like you could, because there is just,
particularly in our polarized society, as it's
absolutely with certain things that are happening, sometimes it doesn't feel right to say something. And so not that it doesn't need to be said, but I think, we need to be mindful of the times and what's happening in other areas with other groups, and be respectful and mindful. And there's just so much going on in so many different levels that it has been extremely challenging. But I think part of, having ADHD and being neurodivergent is that resilience piece that makes us stronger. So, and I think that's a huge difference between a lot of us and, let's say, neurotypical people, is that, I think a lot of the neurotypical may plateau in their personal growth at a certain point, and not that it won't increase or expand, it will, but not to the rate we do, where we have these aha moments, and it's like this moment of clarity, and it's just like all of a sudden the last 6 months or the last year or 2 years or whatever it may be, all of a sudden come together in one thought. We have those, and then we experience a little more self-growth, and then it keeps happening, right? All this self-reflection, I think, in some ways has been good. In other ways, I think that I've really found the depths of Netflix. I don't think there's anything on there that I haven't tried to watch yet.
That's funny. Tell me, Sean, what are your goals for the rest of the year?
I think a lot of that is going to be travel related. One of my goals is to get my second dose of the vaccine. That'll be great. But I'm, as horrible as this has been for a lot of businesses, I've actually done pretty well. I got busier. I was able to get more work. So, one of my goals that I'm actually going to be able to do, Hacky, for the first time since I started my company 6 or 7 years ago, I'm actually going to take a week of paid vacation where
Wow.
I don't have to work, because before I just, money was sporadic, work was sporadic. And so I've done well enough this year that I can actually take a week off and like pay myself for it, and not have to worry about seeing this client then, or, answering an email at this time. I don't know how to set up my automatic email, but somebody's going to help me with that. But so that's one of my big goals is to kind of be more present with my family. I think, with the ADHD part and being an entrepreneur, it's easy to justify things as work, sometimes a little too easy. So for me, my goal really is to kind of be able to take a step back and spend more meaningful time with my family, and be more present in what I do.
Well, that's great. Your priorities are much appreciated. Uh, Something that in this era of where nothing has an end. It used to be like my folks, may they rest in peace, they worked really hard at the family gas station and what they did. But let me tell you, when my father got out of work at 7:30 or whatever time it was Miller time. You were done with work, and it didn't start
Yeah.
again until 6:30 the next day. Nowadays, your work and my work never ends. No one's work does, because emails, phone calls, cell phones. When I used to play stickball with my buddies from Jersey City, 3 hours without interruption, pretending you're Mickey Mantle and the Yankees, and just getting a breather. If you missed the Ed Sullivan show at 8 o'clock on a Sunday, tough.
Yeah.
You didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
Now you can binge watch, you can this, you can that. And I think that's taking a toll on people too. And then the coronavirus times put it on steroids, where you have to have the discipline to say what you just said. I'm taking a week off, and I'm not going to look at my emails, and God bless you. I don't know that I could not look at my emails for a week.
Well, you know what, to go back to the strategies, Hacky, this is one of the things that I've started doing on a Friday. I have a note set in my calendar at 5 p.m. that says turn email notifications off. And so I turn them off for the weekend. And then I have another note in my calendar Monday morning at 9 o'clock, turn on email notifications. So because I would get emails on the weekend and I would read and be like, oh, why did I read that? And then it would sandbag my weekend, right? I mean, I could be doing something. I could be out with my wife, having a date, or playing with my son, or going for a bike ride or whatever. And then I see that email, I'm like, oh, and it sets us back. And I think, the whole concept of masking is something that's kind of come to the forefront. And I think for a lot of us, we're just so used to masking that stuff. and pretending like we're present when we're not. Our mind is somewhere else, because we are easily distracted into a million different things. But, I try to ask myself, one of the driving questions for me is, how does this move me forward? So, how does me having my checking this email move me forward right now in what I'm doing with my son or with my wife, or if I'm trying to do one of my hobbies or learn a new skill? It doesn't. So that really is the driving question for a lot of the things that I do now.
Well, you've just helped me a great deal. I feel like I've been in therapy with you because you're
The
helping
bill's
me
in
a
the mail,
lot.
Hacky.
You're helping me a lot. Um, Sean, it's so great to see you all the time. Is there anything you'd like to talk about that we have not covered?
Sure. One thing. Well, actually, there was two things. There was a new grant that was awarded to the folks at UConn, which is just it's amazing. So the project that was submitted, the title of it is "Encouraging the Participation of Neurodiverse Students in STEM Graduate Programs to Radically Enhance the Creativity of the Professional Workforce." And so this was two grants. Total, I think, is just under $1 million. And this is also by I can't remember his last name, Dr. Rash, that you'd interview earlier, and a colleague of his, a PhD student. So that's very exciting. And I'm going to be on the advisory board for that as well. So that's also really neat. And then the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Hacky, was, we talked about the executive function piece. And how that's a challenge. And so I'd been working with a client of mine, and and the parents subtly complained about the kid having a hard time cleaning the room. And I met some people in the virtual reality space, and I came up with an idea of creating a virtual reality experience to teach kids how to clean their rooms. And because this is something I struggled with personally, I can remember my parents saying, asking me to go clean your room. I would go to my room, I wouldn't know where to start. And then I would open my desk drawer, and there was just, pencil shavings and all this stuff. And so I would spend an hour cleaning that part of my room, my desk. And my parents look at me and really frustrated and say, "What the heck? You've been in here for an hour. We asked you to clean your room. You haven't picked anything up." And I would say, "But look, they're like, we don't care about your pens and your pencils. Look at all the stuff that's all over your floor." Right. So for me, I kind of came up with the idea of creating an experience that, although would be for neurodivergent people, this is something like much like Siri, right? Like a lot of technology is actually disability driven. Society just takes it for granted when it becomes mainstream. And so I really strongly feel that this is going to be one of those things where more people who are not neurodivergent will also be using this to teach them how to efficiently clean their rooms. And so it'll give you an idea of, where to start, and it'll let you know when you're done, and it'll be a step-by-step
That's
process.
great. Well, what you just said, step by step. I have a chapter in the Asper Tools book about chunking. In other
Yeah.
words, if you tell someone with ADHD or autism or whatever label you want, or tell Hacky, whatever I am, if you say, clean your room, I'll walk around in circles and get nothing done. If you chunk it out and say, make the bed and then come and get me, okay? And
Yeah.
then, like you say, you do in your life, you make lists of everything to do. Those are the tools and the attitude toward it, instead of just, oh, you're stupid, you can't clean your room. What have you been doing in there?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so it'll, they'll learn how to do this in virtual reality, but then it'll become a transferable skill where they'll actually be able to apply this into their real life.
That's brilliant.
And so this will hopefully be one of many life skill virtual reality experiences that will develop, and I'll be crowdfunding for it later. But one thing, as you're talking, that I wanted to mention to you is that something that, I had a realization a few weeks ago working with someone, you said chunking. And so in chunking, I try to put things in batches of 2. Because when you add that third thing, so when you ask a kid to do 3 things, they'll get jumbled up and they'll forget. But if you give them 2 things, they'll remember that. And then you can have them back and do 2 more things. But when you introduce that third, that's when things start to cycle and go sideways. But when you can keep things two at a time, or then work on that into multiples of two, things go much smoother. So again, it's not trying to get kids to fit into our world, to give them that long list of things to do, but us fitting into their world and recognizing that if we give them two things at a time, then they're going to be more likely to complete what it is we're asking them to do, and then to come back.
Well, Sean Smith, always a pleasure to hang out with you. Thanks for teaching us so much with Don't Diss My Ability. ADHD is here and you're tackling it head on. Thanks for all you do.
Oh, thanks for having me, Hacky. I appreciate it.
Exploring Different Brains is a production of Different Brains. Visit us at differentbrains.org.